Good afternoon, Grand Erie, and welcome back. For those of you who I have not had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is April Smith, and I have the pleasure of serving you, our wonderful Grand Erie staff, as well as the students, families, and community partners in our district in the role of superintendent. The senior team would like to welcome you back for another year of learning, leading, and inspiring in Grand Erie. We hope that you've had a great opportunity to connect with colleagues this morning and engage in learning about reopening plans and our bold new Grand Erie multi-year strategic plan. We will continue our afternoon of learning and reflection with Kristen Monder, one of our amazing Grand Erie educational assistants, who will lead us in our land acknowledgement.
Grand Erie District School Board recognizes the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people as the traditional peoples of this territory. We acknowledge and give gratitude to the Indigenous peoples for sharing these lands in order for us to continue our work here today.
Thank you, Kristen. At this time, we welcome Director Joanna Roberto to bring us greetings and introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Jean Clinton, who will lead us in a discussion about how we can best support our students and each other as we head back to school next week. Director Roberto.
Thank you, April. Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us in this virtual space. We have approximately 3,500 staff joining us today. We are looking forward to an inspiring and informative keynote. On behalf of senior team, we would like to thank Superintendents April Smith and Leanna Thompson, as well as Piali Bagchi and their incredible teams for hosting this event for all of us. This afternoon, we welcome Dr. Jean Clinton to Grand Erie. Dr. Clinton will address how together we can build a culture of learning, well-being, and belonging to support students and staff. I understand that you unpacked our new multi-year strategic plan this morning at your schools and sites with your principals and colleagues. And we are counting on each of you to bring it to life and to recognize and acknowledge the incredible role each of you play in our schools each and every day. Our new vision starts with 3 simple and powerful words. They are active and hopeful words: learn, lead, inspire. While it is a vision for the future at Grand Erie, it is also a descriptor of each of you: learners, leaders, inspirers. And those words will lead us to our new mission. Together, we build a culture of learning, well-being, and belonging to inspire each learner. Your students will be looking to you for guidance, encouragement, and support when they return. They need to feel inspired, and we are the ones who can inspire them. All of our departments are working very hard to align all of our supports and resources for schools and staff members this year. And we look forward to seeing and hearing how you're making the plan come to life in your schools and departments. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Jean Clinton, a clinical professor from the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster, and an associate in the Department of Child Psychiatry at Sick Kids Hospital. She is renowned nationally and internationally as an advocate for children's. Her special interests lie in brain development and the crucial role relationships and connectiveness play. Jean champions the development of a national comprehensive child well-being strategy, including a system of early learning and care for all young children and their families. Dr. Clinton has also authored her first book, Love Builds Brains, and I know this afternoon she is with her grandson, Liam, and we welcome Liam in the background to this exciting event. Again, we welcome you, and we look forward to learning with you today.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Director Roberto. I am just so pumped to be here with you today, and having had the opportunity to look at your strategic plan. I think you have just such a great ideas and direction forward, and I love the wedding that you have of well-being, as well as equity, and as well as academic achievement. So I'm going to speak with you for the next little while. I need to teach my recording timer to work, but I'm going to talk to you, give you some ideas of ways to think about your interaction with the children and young people in the board. I mean, there are 3,500 of you, and so it's so thrilling to be able to talk to an entire school board, everybody whose lives touch the lives of children, because you heard I'm a child psychiatrist, and I can tell you in my 35 almost years in child psychiatry, I know the important roles that so many of you play. I can tell you story after story about how custodians were the ones who in fact got kids re-engaged in school, how bus drivers with their lovely warm greetings, including my brother, warm greetings and reaching out to children with special rights makes such a difference. And for my 5 kids growing up, oh my goodness, the secretary at the school, with my chaotic, busy life, keeping them fed some days, just all of you make such a difference in the lives of children. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for the work that you have done diligently in challenging times. I can't believe that you developed a strategic plan with a new director in this period of time through COVID. It tells me you are a board that is driven and passionate about doing the right things for all learners, that you have a profound belief that every child is capable of learning. But you know what? You have done this through incredibly tough times. You've had a lot going on, you might say, like this guy with his carrying his load. And so I want to thank you for all of the children whose lives you touch, and who I know have felt the love and the dedication. But it has been hard. And I'm going to acknowledge, I'm going to spend a little time with you to kind of help you understand why has it been so hard. On the one hand, so you see that hand gripping on to get to the pinnacle, to get to the finish, the top. And so some of you are still feeling that are we making the right decisions? Or is it safe enough? Why isn't everybody vaccinated before we come back? So you've got lots of things that you're kind of gripping on. But for so many of us, this is a time of celebration, of absolute joy, that yay of that hand reaching up and saying, we've made it this far. We've made it this far. We are resilient. We've gone through a lot, but here we all are today. We may still have a lot of stuff in our backpacks, but here we are ready and prepared for the next phase and the next stage. So, speaking of the next phase and the next stage, one of the realities is that there's lots of kids, and actually lots of you, who have had a hard time, and that the mental health needs of kids are going to be very, very high and prevalent. And it's why I'm so thankful to have spent the time with your mental health team, who are top notch. But I also have to answer the question very frequently of, if there are so many kids, Jean, who are suffering, why are you not sitting in your office seeing them? Why are you doing presentations to 3,500 people? And it has to do with the fact that I had a great educator, a great teacher, the late Dr. Paul Steinauer, who said, Jean, we always, as child psychiatrists, we always need to be seeing and connected with kids, as I am with consultation work still. But, you know, you feel so helpless at times. You feel like you're in the middle of a river with kids with difficulties and challenges rushing by, and you can only get the few that actually get into services. And he said, we need to be dedicating much more of our time upstream, trying to figure out how are those kids falling in the river in the very first place, that river of mental health challenge and distress. So it's like this other little picture here. I decided I needed to be up at the top of the cliff creating a fence rather than just stuck in the bottom, getting the kids as they fall over in the ambulance. And so I have a hugely strong belief that we have a public education system that is in fact upstream, that if we get it right, the public education system that can help every single child feel that they belong, every single child have at least a child and youth. When I say child, I mean all the way up to the adolescent under construction brains as well. If they can have one adult whose eyes light up when they arrive on that bus, when they arrive to bring in their late slip, when they arrive into guidance, wherever it is, if there's one adult whose eyes light up and say, I'm so happy to see you today, thank you for turning up, that's going to change their brains. But you know, our brains and the kids and the youth brains have actually been changed a lot through COVID. And we have to talk about how that is. I'm a McMaster, a medical school graduate. So that means that I'm one of the weirdos who had a degree in music and philosophy before starting. But what we learned at McMaster Medical School is that the world is full of facts. What you need to be able to do is understand concepts. You need to be able to, and we often said as medical students and in our training that, I may not have the answer now, but I know how to find it. And so me understanding how concepts, the underlying mechanism of things is really important. So let me talk now about why COVID, this period of time, these past 18 months have been so very, very hard. And it has to do with the brain. So the other thing you need to know about me, and as well as being an upstreamist, I'm a bit of a brain geek. And so I love the brain. And what we know about the brain is that it does not like uncertainty. In fact, it's an organ of adaptation. That means that the environment influences the brain. And so it means that the brain is continually learning, checking the environment. Is it safe? Is there danger? Is there threat? It's doing that so many times a second that when we're in a place like COVID, our brain areas that are responsible for that, they're called our fight or flight or amygdala in our deep part of the brain, our limbic system, that has been firing completely in overdrive. We've had limbic system overdrive, and that means that we have been on guard. And you know what it's like when you're on guard? Holy cow, you'll use a ton of energy and you're not thinking about your shopping list about what you need for dinner when you're on guard. So we know that uncertainty makes your brain yield control to that limbic system, which uses tons of energy. So guess what? No wonder you're fatigued. No wonder you're fatigued. Pandemic fatigue is an absolute thing. It is a normal, natural way that our bodies respond to this uncertainty, this bombardment with change. So why do I tell you this? Well, it's so that you can give yourself a break and say, man, oh man, I sure am tired, but now I know why. Not only that, not only do I know why, I know I'm not alone. You are not alone in what you've gone through. You are not alone in moving forward with hope and with joy to create an experience, a learning experience for everybody in your organization. Recognizing that it's pandemic fatigue means that you can name it, to claim it, to tame it. But why is it really important that I spend the time talking about pandemic fatigue and uncertainty in the brain? Well, it's because I've learned from my colleague, Dr. Dan Siegel, that this is going to last for an unknown amount of time. Wait a second, Jean. You just said that the brain doesn't like uncertainty, and you're now telling us that it's going to be uncertain for a longer period of time. And the big answer is absolutely yes. So what does that mean? Well, I'll give you a clue. When you have a sense of purpose, when you have a sense of direction, you can deal much better with uncertainty. So these are VUCA times, as Dan describes them, Dan Siegel. So that means VUCA times are times that are volatile, that are uncertain, that are complex, that are ambiguous. And for sure, that's what we're going through. So what we need to know is if we're going to be in a period of uncertainty for who knows how long, how can the brain create a balance? Because what the brain and the body wants to do is come to a balance called homeostasis. How can I deal with all this stress and still get on with what I'm doing? I'm going to give you what we know can make you feel certain of what you can move forward with. I've already mentioned one, having a sense of purpose. The other huge one is focusing on the things that you have control over. So one of the things that you have control over is thinking about what's the why of the work that I do. You know, this is a great TED talk from Simon Sinek from 2009. And it's called something like How Great Leaders Inspire. But you know, what I was so struck by when I listened to it, and I've listened to it a number of times, is the fact that he says great organization and great businesses for sure talk about what they do and how they do it, but where the money is a clear understanding of why they do it. So as I listen to your strategic plan and I see your strategic direction and your mission, it is clearly saying the why of what you do. And I would say underneath that why, so the what, so for example, the what is something like curriculum coverage, the how is pedagogical practices, the why is becoming human developers. And so I'm going to here again say that I see the role of education, all people within your education system, as contributing to the development and the growth of all of the children and young people in your care. So that's human developers, and that's all of you. Every single one of you has a role to play. But you know, as we're thinking about what is the why of education, it means that you have to be thinking about, well, what's my view of the child? Because if you think the child is an empty vessel, for example, like this bucket here, an empty vessel that you have to fill up with what we know as wonderful curriculum and what we know as the rules of getting along in my class and the rules of being on my bus. If we think of the child as an empty vessel, then we'll be filling that bucket. And we're not thinking about them as competent, as co-creators, as full of potential and possibility. And so you really need to examine, what do I see? Do I think that kids and education is about filling the bucket, or is it about igniting the flame of learning? Of course, you're kind of getting a sense here about where I'd land. It's absolutely about igniting the flame. I want to come into classrooms and see learners learning. Teachers teaching is important, but I'm not interested in teachers just being sages on the stage, doing what I'm doing right now, by the way. But you know that they are actually curious about how learners are learning. Why is that? It's because we need to change our paradigm. We need to stop thinking about education as about academics only. It for sure is about academics, but we need an education system now in this complex VUCA world where kids and young people are learning to be good at learning as well as good at life. So that means education now absolutely has to have a double message, a double purpose. And that is not just academic achievement and deep learning, as I'm working with the Michael Fullen and his team, but also well-being. So it's not that we do all of this maths work and all this science work and all this English work most every day, and then on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 2, we do well-being. You know, we slip in some social and emotional learning program. Well-being has to be on your mind all of the time. And what's the key ingredient for that well-being? It's relationships. You see, those relationships are the things that bind those two strategies together. So as I look again at your vision of learn, lead, inspire, I love to see this and think of it as learn a lot together, as lead together, as inspire together, and that we create the conditions where kids see themselves not only as learners, but also as leaders and inspiration for others. But you know, every single person in the organization, educators, everybody should see themselves as learners, as leaders, and ones who can inspire. Why is that? Well, because we've got good research that says when an organization is healthy, when the people in an organization are healthy, when the educators in front of kids are healthy, have good mental well-being, the kids do far, far better. So an education system and a board like yours who is saying we are paying attention to the well-being of all of our adults as well as our kids is so very important. And when we're talking about well-being, this is the World Health Organization's definition of well-being. So talking about you realizing your potential, coping with stresses, working productively and contributing. So well-being is about more than just not being sick. It's not about just the absence of illness. It's absolutely about flourishing. But let me tell you about the framework that resonates most with me. And I have had the absolute privilege and wonderment of some fantastic Indigenous educators and leaders and elders. Tom Porter from Akwesasne, my friend Diane Longboat from Six Nations. And I have learned from them that we need to be looking to creating the conditions where kids and others can learn to lead the good life. And that means having a balance between in the medicine wheel, as you see, the physical well-being, the emotional well-being, the physical well-being, the spiritual and the intellectual well-being need to be in a balance. We have had an education system that has zoned so much into the intellectual, and now finally we're saying, wait a second, the emotional really counts. And then we've got people who thankfully are saying, we need to connect to the land and the physical well-being. And now I'm going to tell you about resilience that has so much to do with having that spiritual connection, that cultural connection. So the Indigenous mental health framework and the Indigenous framework talks about a balance, creating harmony, thinking of the whole child. You know, when I heard Tom Porter speak, he talked about the Mohawk teaching that children are the sacred ones. They are the heart of the nation. It's our sacred responsibility to raise up our kids. Man, oh man, What a North Star that is. What a North Star belief that is. But you know, they also, in this mental wellness framework, look to see, well, how do you get to living that good life? How do you get to create the community that can, in fact, support children, the sacred ones? You know, the word for child in Mohawk, I understand, is something like he who has the light within. Imagine in Grand Erie Board, ensuring, having as one of your mantras, we will see the light within every child. They will see their light reflected in the eyes of the adults that they interact with. So to reach that good life, you need to have a sense of purpose. You need to have a sense of hope, that sense of belonging, and you need meaning in your daily life. All of these things have been so disrupted, absolutely, by COVID. But you know what? Here's a joyous new day starting. Here's a joyous new day starting as we start with the kids coming back next week to think about how are we in all of the roles contributing to the children and ourselves living that good life. So let me talk a bit about what some of the barriers are, okay? So there are some challenges to a healthy mind. I can tell you all about distractibility. So how many of you have found that you are now married to this tool instead of to other healthy relationships? But you know, distractibility has gone zooming sky high. You know, if you are distractible, if you can't focus your attention, if you can't recognize when your mind is wandering and spinning off, then you never get to a sense of awareness and a sense of calm. We've got so much distractibility going on now. It's okay, I'll give you the solutions to this. This is the work of Richie Davidson. The other is, man, oh man, people are so isolated. They've been so alone. So if there is one mantra that you should have, each and every one of you, is how am I creating a sense of belonging and connection with every single person in our board, in our contexts, in our contacts. The other challenge, big challenge for a healthy mind, is absolutely the negative self-talk and depression. We need to be telling ourselves, stop this work of telling ourselves all of these bad things about what's not going well and start focusing on what is going well. And then the other major challenge that I've alluded to earlier is when you've lost your purpose and meaning in life. So how do you create a healthy mind? Well, it's great to know that there are neuroscientists like Richie Davidson, who has studied lots of monks and meditators and developed the whole science of affective neuroscience. So he knows from all of his studies that what we need to have a healthy mind, one, is awareness. So how do you get to awareness? Well, the first thing is you ask the question, how do you get to awareness? How do you get to awareness? How do you get to stop and pause and be fully present in the minute? Well, one of the best ways in the world is just the simple function of focusing on your breath. Breathing in for 5, holding it for 5, breathing out for 7. It changes your physiology. It helps you become aware of what's going on in your body and responding and reacting with a distance between the stimulus and your response. What's the next pillar for a healthy mind? Completely embedded in your strategic plan. That's connection. That's connection, a sense of belonging. When you feel felt, when you see yourself in the faces of others around you, when you see yourselves connecting to curriculum that is meaningful for you, then you have a sense of identity. I am a learner. I am connected. Insight is all about the ability to stop and say, what have I learned about myself? What do I know? How do I read myself? What's going on? And the last one is, we talk over and over again, is a sense of purpose. So why do I care about this as a shrink? Right? You know, I should just know my diagnoses and how to make them. But no way, man. I've learned more about the brain. I'm a brain geek, not a neuroscientist, but a student of the brain. And I've learned so much that tells me that, you know, a baby is born and their brain is only a third of the size it's going to be by the time they're 3. And it is the relationships, the connections, the experiences that they have that actually literally build that brain. It's not genes that determine how smart you're going to be. We used to think that for sure. You know, I used to joke and say, you know, you get your genes for intelligence from your mom and your dad, and then, you know, they use them up. The more kids you have, the dumber they get. So I'm only joking. Don't write that down. It's not true. But what we now know is that you can make yourself smarter. You can make yourself smarter. I can't tell you how many kids I've seen over the years whose intelligence is far higher than their parents were. Why? Because the parents had material deprivation. The biggest cause of mental challenge is not biology. It's the environment. So what we know now is that your brain, who you are, is produced by your experiences, not by your genes. And in fact, your genes are listening to the environment to know if they should be turned on or to be silenced. That's the science of epigenetics. So this is called neuroplasticity. And you as educators, neuro is for the neurons, plasticity is for how it gets changed by experience. And you as educators and part of the education system are neuroplasticians. So this is what happens. We've got trillions of neurons in our brain that all connect to each other when they get stimulated. The neurons that get fired together, like reading to a child over and over again, like an adolescent learning to play guitar or drums or mechanics, singing in the choir or being part of the drama, setting up the stage. All of those experiences, quite literally, all the way up till 28 years of age, is actually building connections and networks in the brain. The neurons themselves, so your neurons right now are being changed by what I'm saying, by what you're hearing. So the good news is that when you've got environments that are enriching, where there's positive interaction, lots of reading, lots of singing, lots of cuddling, resources, that the parents feel that they're well nurtured, then you can develop a healthy architecture of the brain. But if you're living in a place where there's deprivation, where kids are not being nurtured, where parents are so stressed or troubled with mental health and addictions that they don't have what's left to help and support the children, that too will develop their brain. But what we know is that relationships with others can absolutely change that brain architecture for those who have that neglect or maltreatment. That when adults in their lives can support them, they can actually help those neurons and connections grow. Now, everybody thinks about brain development and they think, oh, well, that happens in the early years and then it's done. No way. One, our brain is changing throughout life, but there's another massive accumulation and proliferation of synapses where the neurons talk to each other, and pruning that happens in adolescence. We used to think that the adolescent brain was all about hormones, right? But it's not. Hormones may turn on the start and be involved in the adolescence, puberty, etc. But what we now know, because you're able to image the brain, is that there is change happening in those adolescent years that go from 9 or 10 all the way to 28 now. The prefrontal cortex, that front part of the brain, that reasoning, planning, executive director, is still under construction. up till sometimes 30, you know, sometimes a heck of a lot later in some people, but you get the drift. So, you know, if the brain is changed by experiences, don't you think it's really important that we approach everybody with kindness? Why? From the biology perspective? Well, from the social perspective, you've no idea what people have gone through. You've no idea what life has been like living with COVID or through COVID. But the other thing is, when you say to a person, what's wrong with you? You're giving them a message that they're somehow defective. But if you change your mental model, your mindset, and ask, what's happened to you? Then you're open-heartedly greeting them with kindness. Now, I just talked about the brain, so let me tell you about the brain and kindness. So when you are kind and when you receive kindness, you release different neurotransmitters in the brain like oxytocin, and it neutralizes the stress hormone. So, you know, if somebody, the stress hormones, so you know how if somebody is nice to you, how you say pass it on or pay it forward? That's all about the brain. But, you know, we've had lots of kids who have not experienced kindness, who have experienced lots of isolation. And the World Health Organization is telling us that the adolescent brain, the kids that they have looked at, talked to across the world, have had a real struggle. So does that mean that you have to multiply our resources in mental health times 10? Yep, it does. But the reality is that's never going to be enough. We're never going to be able to treat ourselves out of the number of kids that we're hearing. We need to change significantly the culture of caring in schools, so that kids, as you will see in the wonderful documents that your team has put together, so that the school becomes a welcoming place for all, that all kids feel that they're included, that they learn about how their brain works and how anxiety affects them. Why is that so important? Because relationships neutralize stress. The biggest buffer in times of stress is our relationships. You know, we should never have called it social distancing, sorry. You know, we should have called it physical distancing, but social and emotional closeness. Why? Because when I talk about stress, what we know is that stress affects the brain throughout life, but particularly during development. But stress gets a bad rap. There is absolutely terrific stress, positive stress. You know, so as I'm presenting to you, of course I'm stressed. My physiological system is turned on. I sweat more. You know, my heart rate is faster now as I do this. When you're preparing to run a marathon, that's stressful. You go with that. When you're hot, the body stress system turns on to make you sweat. When you're cold, the body stress system turns on to make you shiver. When you're hungry, you get signals to eat. You know, so the stress system is a complicated system that takes measurement from the inside as well as the outside. So positive stress is good. A little anxiety is good for us because it mobilizes us into action. But the Harvard Center on the Developing Child talks about two other kinds of stresses. Tolerable stress, that is serious temporary stress that so COVID is an example of this, that so many of us have gone through, where there is this serious temporary stress response. Our heart rate's up, we're sweating, all of those things, but it gets buffered by supportive relationships. The stress we really worry about is tolerable stress, sure, but toxic stress, where all of the stress systems are being turned on. It's like you're walking home and you see a bear and the bear is always there. Then your body, your brain is going to be firing all of these stress hormones. And if you don't have relationships that help you know, or you stand up big and pretend you're going to fight, or you freeze and look like you're dead, if you don't know these kinds of things, then you're really in trouble. So what we know is that kids are going to be coming to you next week, and they have had varying degrees of stress. And so the role of you as educators in the education system is to make the world more predictable for them. Change the unknown into known. Be clear about what the expectations are. If you are confused as an adult, discuss it with another adult. Don't go beacon off in front of the kids. They need your certainty as much as possible. Don't lie, but they need your certainty as much as possible. Why? Because their fear response has been highly, highly attuned in this period of time. And so our fear response, by that I mean you can be in a calm state, then you get this stressor coming in deep inside your brain, in that limbic system, your amygdala fires, it releases adrenaline and cortisol. The next area, the hippocampus, is the one that's new learning and memory. It registers how much cortisol there is and says, turn it off, turn it off. It's not, the bear's gone. It's not a snake, it's a cord. And then after that, the threat gets removed and you go in a calm state. But what we need to know is when that stress response is on and on and on and on, the brain is hyper alert and hyper vigilant. In fact, you cannot think when you're under that stress. So what does that mean in terms of your mental model, thinking about the kids? I'm going to say that we need to stop thinking about kids at risk and seeing them instead as at promise. That you, in your relationship, your connection, your high expectation, your creating belonging is going to neutralize through that relationship and connection some of that high alert bears here through your relationships, and they will not be at risk. But if you see them at promise, you think about who are the 5 people in the Indigenous teaching of every child needs 5 people, like the dream catcher, to help them through. So, you know, you all know about growth mindsets. I learned about it from educators. And so what we know is that what we think affects how we feel, affects how we act. What our view of the children, the young people coming to us, no matter where they're coming from, we need to think about, do we see education as an opportunity for all to thrive and flourish? Do you believe in your heart of hearts that all kids can and should have the conditions that they can reach their potential and learn? So what we think affects how we feel, affects how we act. Here's an example from one of my patients from a number of years ago. She was in grade 12. She came late to class, and this teacher on the Monday sent her down to the office immediately. And what she thought he must have thought was, oh, kids these days, they don't care. They don't know how tough it is to be an educator. How he felt was angry and annoyed, and how he acted was he rejected her. The next day, she's late again, but it's a different teacher because she's on an AB schedule. And this teacher says, just go ahead and sit down. I'll talk to you later. She promptly falls asleep. So he comes up to her afterwards and says, what's going on? And she said, well, sir, you know, my mum is really sick in hospital. And so my dad is with her as much as he can be. But our family business is a restaurant. And so I have to go to, after school, go to the restaurant, be there for closing, and I'm there till 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's why I'm late. And it's why I fell asleep in your class. So it's the same kid, it's the same problem, seen from completely different. What you think. She, in fact, wanted to become a teacher because of the experience that she had with that teacher. So what we think, what's our mindset as we return back? We need to, as the adults in children's lives, figure out where are we at? Because the next part is really also important. Our mental state, our emotional state also really matters. How we feel affects how we think, affects how we act. So if we feel that the leadership in an organization doesn't know what they're doing, then we feel really anxious, and what we think is it's not safe, and how we act is we may be more vigilant, or we may quit and leave. So we need in this world to be thinking about the emotional life and world, not only of the young people and the kids, but also of each other. That means in education, in 2021 to 22 school year, we need to be focusing on the well-being of the adults in the system as well, all of the adults in the system. We need to create a sense of connection and a system that if you don't feel connected, you've got an avenue to say, this is how I'm feeling and how can it be different. Why? Because the science of emotions is telling us not only about how kids learn, but how we all learn. Did you know that you don't learn anything unless it anything meaningful, unless it's got a significant emotional connection for you? Did you know also that the work of Mary Helen Immordino Yang is showing us that if educators don't get it, how big and important knowing about emotion in the classroom is, then they're missing one of the key parts of what kids need in order to thrive. So, you know, old Descartes used to say, I think, therefore I am. But what we know is, I feel, therefore I learn. I feel, therefore I learn. So, you know, we have to be aware that behavior is in fact communication. The unexpected behavior. When a kid is, I feel, therefore I learn. Therefore my emotions, my feelings, they have to come out. People need to understand and recognize how I'm experiencing the world, because we need to shift our dialogue from thinking about the kid is misbehaving to the kids have stress behaviors. This is the work of my friend Stuart Shanker. And we need to be thinking about, as the kids are returning to school, there's going to be all kinds of misbehaviors, and we have to reframe the behaviors and recognize that kids will do well if they can. You know what? Adults will do well if they can as well. But kids, we have to shift our mindset to stop thinking that they won't do it, that they're willful or defiant, and say, well, maybe they can't do it. We need to cultivate an attitude of curiosity. We need to have a mindset that views the child as being capable and competent. Why? Because guess what, guys? The educator creates the weather in the classroom. What does that mean practically? That means connect before you correct. Connect before you correct. But you know, when I was presenting in Toronto, an educator came up to me after the talk and said, you know what, Jean, you have to include that the principal creates the weather for the teacher. And then I started talking to my friends and colleagues in education, and they said, well, you know what? It's the leadership that creates the weather for the principals. So connect before you correct. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty about how should we be approaching tomorrow, the next day, as kids are returning to school next week. And I want to share with you this document with 10 principles from the New Pedagogies for Deep Learning team. And I understand that your board has actually been able to dig into this, your senior leadership team. So what is this telling us? It's telling us that the groups across the world, the study that Max and Joanne and Mag and Michael Fullen have done, is showing that when you've got an educational system that uses an asset lens, what can kids do rather than what can't they do? When you use an asset lens, you think about what are kids bringing? What did they learn during COVID? They do better. That when you have that focus on that double helix of well-being as well as academics, you're doing well. How can you intentionally make school a happy place? And that's all of you. That is all of you. Who puts a smile on the face of the kids? Well, I'll tell you, my brother, who is a bus driver for Grand Erie, puts a smile on the face of many of the kids that come on that bus, just as they put a smile on his face. Ignite interest through deep learning or inquiry-based learning or engaging the world to change the world, integrative think about ways that you can deepen learning, not just learn that surface curriculum and kids learning how to be good at taking tests. Remember, differentiated instruction, it might have been a bad word for a while, but it really had as its heart, there's no two individuals alike. We do not learn the same way. I have 5 kids and they never learned the same way. They haven't been the same people. They've changed. They've been their own individual. One size fits absolutely no one. And here's the kicker here. Don't track, don't test, don't retain. Forget this language of learning loss. What do you mean? What an insult to the kids. What an insult to all of the parents who have been struggling so hard. What an insult to you who have been juggling all of the demands of virtual, in-person, where am I, up, down, the Zoomies and the Roomies. And so there's tons that has been learned. Who says the curriculum is the only thing that's worth learning? Don't migrate from tech, leverage it. You're going to have a little bit of a crisis though, because many of the kids, not just the boys, but many of the kids have spent a long time on screens. From the little ones watching presents being opened or cardboard boxes or whatever the heck they're watching on YouTube, to the boys being on, many of them boys, not only boys, but being on Grand Theft Auto, all of those games, Fortnite and what have you. They're going to have a bit of a withdrawal when it comes to school, the first days of school. Maybe for a little bit longer than the first days. It's why your document, the first 20 days that you're going to be looking at, again, done by your fabulous team, is going to be so important. Look out for the kids who are the silent ones. Look out for the kids who are not fitting the mold and forge new pathways of connection with them. Create a hub for all and leave no one behind. And at the heart of the matter really is, how can you create a feeling of safety in every single person in the organization? How can you create a feeling of safety, of connection, of belonging, that's feeling significant and situated, knowing yourself and your purpose? So this is the work of my friend Stephen de Groot. So here's something to really drill into. How, as kids are coming back to school, can you create safety? And that's physical, emotional, social, mental, spiritual, cultural. So how do you do it? You always start with, how are you? Reinforce how great it is to see them, how important they are, how glad you are that they've turned up. Slow the pace right down. We know that when you build trust, it takes time, but once you have trust, you go fast. Regularly check in and see, how are you doing? How do you think things are going? This is true of all of the leaders that you all are in the organization. What does significant mean? It means, how do you help everyone in your organization and educators with the kids and youth? How do you help them feel that they have value and worth? That not just that you say, I value you, kids get told all the time, I love you, but that doesn't make them feel lovable necessarily. You have to show it. It has to come from inside as well as outside. How do you, as you see in your strategic plan, make sure that that belonging and that connection is not something that you just focus on in kindergarten in the early years, but man, oh man, do those adolescents in high school need that sense of connection. Adults don't go away in terms of significance for adolescents. They take a different role for sure. The peer absolutely becomes the predominant focus. So how do you do this? You smile. more often. You say thank you. You stand at the door, not in the classroom, and you greet the kids. Even in high school, you stand in the hallway and say, how are you doing? Glad to see you. How's your mum? What's happening at home that we can help you with? You maintain a positive and optimistic attitude, as I've said, use their name more often. You connect before you correct. And I say 5 to 1. My friend says 3 to 1. I say 5 to 1. And you focus more on what's going well than on what's not. The last great state is feeling situated. And that's what we've lost in so much of COVID. And that situated is that you've got a sense of direction, of clear expectation, clear roles, and the focus on the purpose and the goals. So what does that mean? How do you do that? That people are clear about what the purpose and the goals of education are. Well, my friend and colleague at Dundas High School brings the kids in his classes in high school in, and he says, here are the overall expectations. How are we going to get there? And he provides this flexible structure and routine, but they know what to expect, but there's flexibility within it. The other that's so important is to follow through. If you say something, you actually have to do it. This is a huge one, is having student voice and agency. So students becoming involved in the planning and decision making. Collaborate with them on meaningful goals. So why do we care so much about this? Why do we care about creating the conditions that your strat plan is talking about? Because we want, kids have gone through a heck of a time, and we all have. And so we want them to be resilient. And resilient is really the ability to adapt or bounce back after difficulties. So here are some of the myths. It's not a personality trait. That's a myth. It's not genetically determined. That's a myth. If you're resilient once, you're always resilient. Not at all. I was okay when my dad died. I fell apart when my brother died. The resilience can be expressed in many, many different kinds of ways. So how do we build that resilience for kids? Through creating the conditions of safe, significant, and situated. Within an organization that says that we're going to learn, we're going to lead, and we're going to inspire, because that creates supportive adult-child relationships. That says that the relationship that we have together is a priority. It's not just about stuffing the duck, which I call the coverage of the curriculum. It's about the connections that are created, that sense of belonging, that sense of feeling felt. And the next protective factor that people describe in the literature is a sense of self-efficacy. I have some impact on my world and control over things that I can control, developmentally appropriately, of course. Another protective factor is helping kids develop the being able to go with the flow. That, you know, the adaptive skills of, okay, things aren't working out as planned, I can go with that. Helping them develop the flexibility, knowing that they can trust you when you say what you mean and mean what you say. Self-regulatory capacities obviously are hugely important. The ability to inhibit your impulses, keep in mind why you're doing things and coming up with ideas of how you can manage, absolutely important. But so important also is the sources of faith, hope, and of cultural traditions. So when we think about resilience, everybody plays a part. Because resilience, this metaphor of a scale, is showing that the more positive experiences you have, the kids have, the less weight the negative experiences have. So let me tell you about how impressed I am with the resilience resources that your team have put together. So, and some of these are going to be shared with you. So welcoming and an inclusive return to school, the document is really saying relationships are the heart of the matter. It's saying every single one of us in the school system has a role, has a responsibility, and has a me that they can bring to making the environment welcoming, including kids and student engagement and belonging, understanding well-being, and when kids are feeling anxious. All of these are deeply embedded in your school improvement plans and available to you. So what about you? What about you, the 3,500 adults involved in Grand Erie Board? Well, what do we know about making sure that you're resilient through this? Well, this is the research of Dr. Lucy Hone, and she's looked at lots and lots of people and studied them, and she's discovered 3 characteristics. So take a picture of this or write this one down. If you want to get through these hard times, you have to recognize that, man, oh man, sometimes life is hard. Sometimes life sucks. That suffering is, in fact, a part of life. And you don't waste a single brain cell saying, why me? Woe is me. You say, I've landed in a pile of crapola. Am I going to lie in it, or am I going to get up and brush myself off? Resilient people, that's what they do. The next is, where do you focus your attention? Because where you focus your attention, do you focus on the things that you have got no control over? Waste of time. Choose carefully where you direct that attention. Notice and take in the good. Have an attitude of gratitude, another characteristic. And then the last thing she talks about is you ask yourself, you've got that awareness and that insight to ask yourself, is what I'm focusing on right now, is it harming me or is it helping me? And so, you know, what will the children remember through all of this? So the children are going to remember what Maya Angelou talks about. And that is, I've learned that people forget what you said. People forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So before I finish, I want to show you just this 2-minute video that talks about educating the heart as well as the mind.
When a child is born, we do everything we can to protect them, nurture them, love them. A child's heart and mind are fragile. As they grow, we want to teach them everything we know. We send them to school to fill their minds with wonderful knowledge, to give them the tools they need for life. At school, they get a taste of what things are like in the world outside. There is friendship, romance, disappointment, embarrassment, discrimination, and bullying. But are the tools we give them enough to prepare them for this world? We have an enormous responsibility and an amazing opportunity. If we truly want to prepare them for the world outside, we must also educate the heart. Because to navigate the world outside with compassion, acceptance, and tolerance, we need to teach them compassion, acceptance, and tolerance. This can begin in our schools, and it can start today. It can happen at hockey practice, dance class, at day camps, and music lessons. And it's already happening around the world with astonishing results. If we want our children to grow into socially and emotionally capable young people, we must ask for a balanced education that puts importance on educating both the mind and the heart.
So I'm going to finish with that inspiring video. I want to say thank you to you. I want to say thank you to April and to Dr. Roberto for inviting me to participate and hopefully inspire you as you go into this year that's going to be different than any other. But remember that if you let it, the joy of kids, the joy of learning and leading and inspiring is going to change you. And the other thing that I'm going to leave you with is a bit of homework. And that is the attitude of gratitude. Think about how often in your day do you stop and say, I am grateful for this. We're very good at being the party poopers and say, this isn't going well, this isn't going well. But I'm going to invite you to change your brain on purpose. And that's to have this attitude of gratitude. Because when you have it, your brain changes. In the morning, before you get out of bed, stop and ask yourself, what am I grateful for in this day, for this day? I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be with you, and we'll see you on other occasions through the school year. So all the very best, and take in the good. Take in the good. So thank you very much. I'll stop there and hand back over to April.
Thank you, Dr. Clinton. I'm going to take it over at this point in time. So on behalf of the staff in Grand Erie, I want to extend sincere gratitude to you for taking time to share your insights and expertise to help us become better learners and leaders. Rising together to resilience can seem a daunting task after the last 18 months. Thank you for allowing us to acknowledge our uncertainties, but reminding us that we have to celebrate our accomplishments, that we're not alone. Today, you've provided us with strategies to help us become upstreamists, human developers, I loved both of those terms, and able to see the light and promise in every child. Your words have impacted me personally today, Dr. Clinton. I am grateful to you for reminding me of things I had forgotten or things I might have let go of based on my own personal challenges over the last year. So thank you again for inspiring us today to be optimistic and the best we can be for our students and families as we journey into the new school year. And Grand Erie staff, please take Dr. Clinton's words with you as you move into the last portion of your day today. Take some time to debrief and reflect on the resources that your own mental health and well-being department has provided for you. Dr. Clinton referenced the welcoming and inclusive return to school tip sheet. We also provided the Making the Return to School Successful document, the first 20 days, and as well in our elementary schools, you have a grand return coloring sheets. So thanks to all of you for joining us today, and have a great